Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to learn how to create a 16-page signature sheet in InDesign. If you don't know what a 16-page signature sheet is, don't watch this video. You'll need to go back and watch the one before this on the assignment page. Alright, so very first thing we should do, let's name our file. I'm going to call it 16-page signature, and I'm going to write tabloid, and that's just because this is going to be done on a design for a tabloid piece of paper. The width of tabloid is 17 inches. So I'll just write 17 inches and hit tab. And it's automatically going to convert it to picas for me. If it doesn't, go to picas. And then for height is 11 inch. And then again, if you hit tab, it will automatically convert that to picas. Okay. By the way, there's 6 picas in 1 inch. The orientation is landscape. The pages are 2, right, front and back. That's considered 2 pages, but 1 sheet. Facing pages, uncheck, we don't want. Primary text frame, we don't want. Columns, we only want 1. Margins, we're going to use 6p, okay, which is 1 inch. That's a 1 inch margin. And then bleed and slug, okay. Bleed, as you probably know, is something we do to make sure ink reaches the edge of the page. Because as you know, the printer cannot put ink all the way to the edge of the page. All right, some can, most can't. Now, the thing is, if you add bleed here, okay, it adds it past the edge of the page. So like if we have a tabloid page paper, it's 11 by 17, the bleed will extend to 11 and like a quarter inch or 11 and a half inch. It will be literally, it will try to put ink off the size of the page. When you send that to a professional printer, they know what they're doing. They get an oversized sheet of paper, they run that. If you're gonna take this file to Staples, they don't have paper slightly bigger than tabloid. So they can't handle your request, they won't know. So we have to lay out our design on tabloid, 11 by 17, including everything, including the bleed on that page, and then we'll manually trim it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So that's why this is 0. So we'll hit create. All right, cool. We've got our tabloid paper here, and make sure you are on, your view is set to preview, which is the W key, right? Normal, which is the W key. And that just, shows us our margin. And then if you press Command apostrophe, you'll get your grid, right? View, grids and guides, document grid. Okay, you want to turn that on. These are too many subdivisions. I don't want this many. So let's go to Preferences, Units and Increments. Make sure you're using picas, okay? Origin spread, horizontal picas, vertical picas. And we'll go to grid, and I'm going to change the subdivisions to 4, okay? And the reason is that gives us quarter inch subdivisions. Okay? It's just going to be a little easier to work with. And grid line every 6p, that means every inch. There are 6 picas in 1 inch. Okay? And there's 72 points in 1 inch. Cool. So we're going to hit OK. Right? And look, remember we set our margin to be 1 inch. So there's subdivisions, 1, 2, 3, 4 subdivisions. So each of these squares, I can draw one. I'll draw a square so you know what I mean by these squares. These squares is a quarter inch. And each of these big squares is 1 inch. Okay? Somehow I did not draw a square. Okay. There we go. All right. You might say, well, why do we have to work in, why can't I work in millimeters? If you work in millimeters while you're working on inch paper, it's a nightmare. Let's just go all the way to the bottom corner here. I'm going all the way to the bottom corner of my document, and you see how this grid is perfect? Like my paper starts and ends on a grid line. If we switch to millimeters, I'll have to switch my, don't worry about doing this, I just want to demonstrate this. If I switch my grid to millimeters, well, maybe I have to toggle it. Why is that not? Oh, okay. So the reason it does line up perfectly is because our grid lines are preference here. Grids. Look, our grid line is every 25.4 millimeters, right? So that means that these squares are 25.4 millimeters, which, I mean, that's kind of a hard number to work with. Like, how many grid lines are 10 millimeters, right? Like, or how many grid lines would be 100 millimeters? Like, if it was inches, you would just be like, okay, well, it's one grid line per inch, right? So you could say, okay, well, let's make this a round number. Let's make it 30. But now look, our document doesn't fit the grid anymore. Okay, and honestly, it's just a nightmare. You don't want that. So use picas on metric. Use picas on inch paper. All right. Sorry for the detour. Back on track. The very first thing we want to do is draw our crop marks. Okay. So I'm going to get my pen tool, and I'm looking at the small squares here, the grid line increments, and I'm going to draw one. I'm going to draw a line just in between like two, which is half an inch, right? Each little square is a quarter inch, so this is half inch. I'm going to put a stroke on it of 1 point and a fill of none. And the stroke color is going to be registration, because generally you want crop marks to be in registration. Normally I wouldn't make it 1 point, but I just want you to be able to see on screen. If I make it what it should be, crop marks are usually a quarter point. You know, it's just going to get so small on screen as I work here that you won't be able to see what's going on. So for that reason, I'm making it 1, but you should make it 1/4, 0.25. Okay, so I'm feeling good about this, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is perfect, but look, it's not perfect. The length of this is 3p 0.24. That is not good. We want exactly 3p, so I'm going to change that to 3p. All right, and it looks like this is perfectly aligned with this grid line here, but it's not. See that? It's not perfect. So what I'm going to do is use the actual numbers on my grid to position it. Okay, I want to position it exactly on that grid line. So x direction, right? We know it's 6p, 6 picas. Why? Because it's an inch. Our margins are in 1 inch, so we know it's 6p. So it's already perfect. I don't have to touch it. It's this bottom one. It's this y that's bad. I want this tip here to be 3/4 of an inch. 3/4 of an inch, which is 4 picas and 6 points. Okay, 4 picas and 6 points. So make sure that you're changing the anchor. We want the anchor to be at the bottom, right? We want the anchor to be this point right here. So we set it to that. And then we're going to write 4p6. And now that is spot on, 100% correct. All right. Now I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to press Option, drag. And I'm going to rotate it. Hold down Shift to get a perfect rotation. And I'm going to put it here. Our other crop mark. Now, okay, I got really lucky. It's perfectly positioned. 4p6 and 6p. So that means that the tip, right? Remember, we can choose which one we're working on here. 4p6, 3/4 of an inches, perfectly lined up, and then 6p or 1 inch in the Y direction. All right, now I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to put it here. And we're going to double check these. Okay, 4p6, you know, that's no good. I mean, that's good. We're okay with that. But this one, 59p, I'm going to change it to 60. And now we're bang on. All right, let's repeat. Drag it out, rotate. Okay, what do we want this to be? We want this to be X, we want it to be 1p. And okay, it's snapped in, 61p6, that's perfect. Let's go over here. Rotate this. And always make sure that you're aware of, you know, where the anchor, which anchor point you're positioning. This should be 96, and that's 61p6, that's correct. Sometimes, you know, you're like positioning it and you're using the center anchor point or something, some kind of error. Okay. So this should be 60, and this should be 97p6. One more to go. 100p6. Okay. No, 97p6. So I didn't have the anchor in a good spot. Okay, cool. Rotate. You might say like, oh, what does it matter? Like if it's out a fraction. I mean, I guess it doesn't until you start to have lots of things that are out, and they compound. So this last one here, this Y should be 4p6. They compound. You fold one thing on the line and it's out a fraction. Then you fold the next one and now it's out 2 fractions. And by the time you fold something 4 times, you've multiplied that, you know, change by 4. And now say you have another error somewhere else that's slightly out. That one gets multiplied by 4. You've got 2 things that aren't lining up a lot more than you anticipated. They weren't going to line up. So that's an issue. All right, cool. So I hope you understand what's going on here. Now we have crop marks. So when we design with bleed, right? Let's say like that. Let's say I want that color like that to bleed like that. You, the designer, will come along and you will just cut, you know, right through this like that. Right? You'll cut right through like that, and that will give you color to the full edge of the sheet. Now, it's not going to be actually tabloid by the time you've cut it, but that's what happens when you're printing at Staples or at home and you don't have access to a printer who can print on oversized sheets. And for this assignment, it's perfectly okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, you know, actually at this point, I realized I've made a mistake. I drew these crop marks on the page, and I should have drawn them on the parent page. The parent page. The parent page is like a template inside your template. So it just means that anything I draw on this, like literally this here, when I double click, I'm now editing this page, anything I draw on that will appear on any of your document pages that have that letter A. See that? Letter A. These have letter A. For the sake of demonstration, if I create a new one, new parent, okay, it's going to default to being parent B. And if I create a new page in my document, and I grab B, and I click and I drag, and I apply it to this, look, now this one's B. So I'm editing this. I'm editing this parent page. Let's say I draw like a rectangle. You'll notice that that rectangle now appears on B. And if I go to A, and if I draw a circle, you'll notice that that appears on the 2A pages. Okay, so parent pages, like, they're super useful. We can put special characters that count our page numbers. right? So every single page, this would be if you're doing like a large document, every single page will have the page number in the exact same place, or the running head, you know, anything like that, really. All right, so let's get our crop marks onto the parent page where they belong. Command and Control X. Why don't I turn on my keycaster? Command or Control X. Double click on the parent page and Command Shift V. Command Shift V. Will that paste in place? Edit. Paste in place. Command Shift Option V. So probably Control Shift Alt V on Windows. All right, cool. And now you'll see when we go to page 1, they're there, and they're also on page 2. Okay, so now I'm going to divide this up into a grid, and I'll show you a couple ways to do it. Remember, we're creating the 16-page signature sheet that I demonstrated how to fold in the last video. We're making that now, so we need 8 sections, like we'll call them. So let's go back to the A parent, and I want to turn my grid back on. Here's one way to do it. I'm going to take a rectangle, and I'm going to draw a rectangle inside my margins, and I'm going to snap it in. All right, and look, 51p, 0, 6p, all nice round numbers, so I know it's snapped in. I know I'm good. I want this to be, what do I want it to be? 4 by 2, right? 4 across and 2 tall. That's 8, and then double-sided is 16. So I can literally just go to the width here and type in /4. And that's going to divide the width by 4. And the height /2. And that's going to divide the height by 2. Okay, now I'm going to put this here. I want to make sure I'm snapped in, and I know I'm snapped in because I got nice round numbers. And then I'll just drag a guide out. And I'll drag another guide out. And you can always select your guides. See that? 28p6. I got nice round numbers, so I know my guides are snapped into place. And then I'm just going to move this, and I'll drag out another guide, and I'll drag out another guide. Okay, and now I'm just going to delete that. And there you go. Right? So that's one way to do it. We have other ways of doing it. You know, this actually, whoops. Where do my guides go? Redo. Oh, I gotta do them all over again. Okay. I actually don't like guides like this. I think it looks messy. Okay, and I also don't like that there's sort of extra information here, because this guide suggests something's over here. I don't know why. So I think it would be better if we took the pen tool and actually drew over these guides with cyan. Okay, and again, I'm leaving it 1 point. You should be using 1/4 point. Okay, and I'm verifying that they've snapped in. And I'm just going to use, I'll delete this guide now, I don't need it anymore. I'm going to use Option Shift Drag to place it over, right over the existing guide. And then I'll delete the old guide. And I'm going to make sure this is a nice round number so I know it's perfect. And then I'm going to drag this over here and delete the old guide. Then make sure this is a perfect number, a perfectly round number. It should be 73p6. Cool. All right, and let's get one more here. This one, rotate this, line it up, delete the guide. Now, here is one of the problems with this. So this looks way better to me. This is a much more professional layout. Again, this should be quarter point. This is a much more professional looking layout. But one thing we have a problem is that these are going to print, right? These will print, and maybe we don't want these to print. Well, we definitely don't want these to print. So there's a trick. If you select your items that you don't want to print, and if we go to Object, Output, Attributes, you can make these non-printing items. Non-printing items are exactly what they sound like. They will not print. So I'll click that. Okay, they're now non-printing items. And then I'm going to hit the Shift W. Okay, Shift W. And that's showing me a preview of my document, which, because those are non-printing, they're not shown in the preview. If I highlight them and turn off non-printing, so like now they are printing, and press Shift W, there's my guides again. Okay, so let's make them non-printing again. Okay, let's make this even more professional. So I'm going to take text tool here, and I'm going to put the letter A here, and I'm going to color my A in cyan, because I've decided that these colors, cyan is the color of guides. I'll press Command or Control B to bring up the text frame options. And I'm going to center my letter A here. I'm going to make it big, 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 big. Oops. I don't know, 60 point. Let's go bigger. 70 point. And centered. Okay. Well, it's a 16 pager, so I'll give you a hint. This is page 1, and this is page 16. I'm not going to do all of the others, but now, and by the way, don't forget to make these non-printing. Okay, so now you can see that these are like guides for you to start drawing on. Okay, so maybe the way you deal with this is you've drawn everything in Illustrator. Now you're going to place these and just place them into these frames. And you're laughing. And the best part is, if you don't like InDesign, you really don't even have to open InDesign or touch InDesign again until it's time to export the PDF. Right? You can edit, you can place all of your AI files, and it is okay to place an AI file in InDesign. As long as you're not doing anything like super wild effects, it's usually okay. Although you should test it first and check with your printer. Anyhow, once you place all these things, you can do all your work in Illustrator and just open this back up when it's time to print. Right? Cool. So let's, what else is there to cover? Oh yeah. When you go to print this, you may run into an issue if you're using Mac where they can't read your USB key. Okay? The way to make sure that doesn't happen is to format your USB key as something called FAT32, which is just a Windows and Mac compatible file table format, actually. So without getting too technical, Apple uses something called Journaled, HFS Journaled, which is like a filing system that the computers understand. And Windows uses something called NTSF. Both of them can use a shared system called FAT32, File Allocation Table 32-bit. So now that that's over, the way to like make sure that your USB key, your USB stick, is like the right one, is to open something called Disk Utility. So this, you have this on your Mac, it's always installed. Disk Utility. Okay, And unfortunately, I don't even have a USB key to show you. But you would plug in your USB key here, and then you would hit erase. All right, and make sure, please make sure you're not erasing your actual hard drive, okay? And please make sure you don't have any important files on your USB drive when you do this, all right? You need to erase it, and then you need to reformat it as FAT32, File Allocation Table 32. And then you should be able to, you should be able to have it read at any print shop, all right? And that's it really. The only other like concern that can happen is that sometimes these pages will get flipped on the long side and sometimes on the short side. So like what I mean by that is you could flip the printer, the physical printing machine could flip the paper on this side, or it could print it on this side. And the way I've got this design, the way the design is laid out, if you follow my Imposition tutorial from the other video, if it flips on the long side, one half will be upside down, one side of will be upside down. So I've set it up for a short edge flip, and so you are going to have to tell the printer to make sure it's a short edge flip. Okay, just something to keep in mind. And what I really recommend is never print it the most expensive way first. So get your notepad out, write down the settings you're using, print it the cheapest way possible, black and white, even on smaller paper, scaled down. Just print a rough copy, right? And then once you get it working, switch to the full-size paper in full color on the nice paper. But if you buy one sheet of really nice paper and you send it to print and you screw it up, you're going to be heartbroken. So please make sure you figure out how to print it beforehand, okay? And maybe if you have any questions, you can always ask me. Okay, so thanks everyone, and have a great day.